We're going to have a little session. We're going to talk about buying backlinks. We're going to talk about getting backlinks, and we'll see how everything has changed since the leaks. Google how a lot has changed in the way I approach this. But before that, to understand how everything has changed, I wanted to talk to you about something else. I wanted to ask you about your first time. For me, it was with someone I didn't know, with whom I had my first time. I didn't pay for that first time. I was 21 years old, so I was relatively young. Old, I don't know, it depends on what we're talking about. It allowed me to show off a bit in front of my friends. Honestly, I didn't know much about it, but I was happy to have my first time. Of course, I'm talking about getting backlinks. I don't know what you were thinking, ladies and gentlemen, but it was during an SEO contest. I was 21, just discovering SEO. I had an SEO contest with my class. And then there was Alan Kladix, the first big SEO guy I met, who is a huge fan of SEO contests. And he tells me, listen, we've got plenty of sites to make links and all that. I'll send you some backlinks. And so he sends me backlinks. He gives them to me because I'm a student. Our group wins. That's when I discovered my passion for SEO. When I was showing off in front of my friends, explaining that I had gotten backlinks. I had done it for the first time. I was happy. But it wasn't really a true first time. Now I'm going to tell you about my real first time. This time it was a bit more thought out. This real first time, it was a bit more considered. It wasn't something spontaneous like that. I had had time to watch some videos to learn how to do it this time. However, this first time I did it in public and I ranked. Honestly, it was effective. I was happy. I didn't wait very long before doing it again. That first time, that real first time, that first time I paid was when I bought directory listings. I bought directory listings on eReferer. I had watched a video by Romain Mikula and Julien Jimenez, who at the time had done the case study, Baby Cook. This must have been around 2018. The video must have been a few months old. And he said that directory listings were effective. So I bought directory listings too, to do like the pros, and it actually worked. I ranked. It was a site called SEO Bordeaux. That was the first time I ranked thanks to directory listings and backlinks that I bought. So at that point, I thought that was my first time. I felt powerful. I felt like that first time had given me something, and I didn't wait. Actually, it still took 6 months before ranking. When you create a site, it takes time for things to happen. So I didn't wait to rank before starting again. Thank you. I was already hooked. I was already in love with it. I loved doing it. So what was the first time I did it with someone else? That's a big question. And there were people who paid me to do it. So this time someone approached me and said, I'd like you to do it for me. I'd like you to do it on me. And I'm willing to pay you to do it. I really enjoyed doing it, buying links for him, of course. So I bought links for this client. It was the first time I was doing it for someone else. I was happy to do it. Thank you. As I was doing it, as I was buying links, I was thinking to myself, wow, I really love what I'm doing. I felt a passion that I was just discovering. And I realized that I could make it my everyday life. At that moment, I told myself I could buy links for the rest of my life. I love it. It's really cool. And little by little, I told myself, okay, I still didn't know anything. I was still a real newbie, that's all. But I was learning little by little. I was learning, I was making progress. That was the time when I was personally and honestly, all of France was obsessed with TF. Why were we obsessed with TF? That's a good question. I don't know who it was that started this obsession with TF, but being obsessed with TF when you start building links is actually pretty reassuring. When you think about it, the exact definition of trust flow is the flow of trust, the flow of confidence. So it's really cool. It's satisfying to buy links based on trust flow. Majestic seems like a serious company. It's an English company and so on. You feel professional when you buy based on trust flow. So everyone was doing it. I was buying my first expired domains. I had been doing SEO for a year and a half. I was buying my first expired domains, selling links, little things like that. And I only bought them based on TF. I had sites with 2 referring domains and 30 TF, so I bought them. I had sites, everything was based on TF. I was a TF fan, like all of France at the time. TF had built up all that trust. And then Jérôme Pascaline came along and destroyed all that trust. He destroyed all my confidence in my method, in link building, because he explained in a video how you could manipulate TF. At that point, I thought to myself, actually, I've been getting screwed over for years. So at that moment, I was really disgusted. And so I entered a new era, so to speak, a new era of netlinker, as we say in France. That was my secret life as a swinger. I had become a link swinger, obviously, on Facebook groups. I would go on Facebook groups. I would show the few experiences, the few expired domains I had, and I would trade links. And on that occasion, actually, at that time, I met a lot of SEOs, a whole bunch of people who were, well, we were just there for something very pragmatic. We wanted to exchange with each other. I met a lot of people with whom I chatted a little, just for a link exchange. Then, much later in my SEO career, when I was exchanging again on Facebook, I realized that I had already exchanged with them 4 years earlier for a link swap. It was always funny. I started to earn a little more money. I was doing subcontracting for an agency that told me, go ahead, send links, etc. So at that point, I started to pick up other concepts. Little by little, I realized that the topic had to be increasingly relevant. I told myself that the topic was important in SEO. And there was a moment when, in this hidden part of my life, in this period when I was doing a bit of freelance work alongside my studies, I got paid for giving advice. And that's something that really changes the way you see things quite simply, because there was an agency, a web agency that had clients. That was their business. There were 3 of them in the agency. They paid me for advice on netlinking. They said to me, so how do you think we could improve our site in terms of netlinking, etc.? And that was really a moment when I shifted, because if someone is paying me for advice, if someone, an adult since I was still a kid, is willing to pay me for advice, it means I have the knowledge. And right then I thought to myself, I'm a little netlinking genius. I figured it all out. That's it. I have the knowledge, and it's really, you can see the Dunning-Kruger effect kicking in. I'm at the peak of Dunning-Kruger. I'm at the top of the learning curve. I feel like a genius, and I've only been doing this for 6 months. You can sense this is going to go badly, but I feel like I'm this genius, which I'm really not at all. And then so I finished my studies and land my first real job in SEO. And there, someone with much more experience starts teaching me, really teaching me how to do all this, sharing their experiences with me, passing on what they've learned. So I'm living my Mediterranean life in Malta. We're really enjoying it. Julian mentioned it earlier, this little island that is Malta. And so there's someone, Romain Mikula in this case, who's teaching me things. What's really interesting is that I talked to you about this a year and a half ago. So just a few, let's say 18 months earlier in my experience, in my life, there was Romain Mikula, who was already the person whose video I had watched on YouTube and who told me that TF was important and that you needed to buy XPs, and who started to get me into SEO and got me to buy and sell links. So it was an original event which was coming across that video. And now that same person is teaching me how to buy links. And there you go. What does this person say to me? What does this boss say to me? He tells me, you're not spending enough. Leo, you need to spend more. You need to shell out more money. You're not putting in enough money. So I tell myself, okay, I'll start spending more. I'm also being taught the finer details. He's teaching me a lot of things, a lot of nuances, a lot of details, theories about internal page rank. He's teaching me lots of methods, lots of types of links. I'm discovering, in particular, positioned links, homepage links, relinking, and a concept called PBN, which I already knew about from afar, but not at the scale I'm seeing in Malta. So my world is expanding tremendously. It's expanding in every direction. And I tell myself it's absolutely crazy. This way you can buy links. I'm discovering a type of link that I think only certain people know about, because I don't think it's a very good way to buy links. But the guest post that's linked from the homepage, meaning the article is permanently linked from the homepage. These are the kinds of things I'm learning about. I'm also discovering lots of tools, and I'm starting to develop theories. I'm someone who has always liked coming up with a lot of theories. And at that point, I already had some micro theories before, but honestly, they were kind of lame. Back in the TF days, my theories were really lousy. And now I'm starting to have theories where even when I look at them now, I tell myself that they weren't stupid, honestly. And I came up with a theory that I call the theory of averages. The theory of averages is that a metric, Jérôme Pascolin taught me this, can be skewed. You can manipulate TF. If you take a look on Fiverr, you'll realize that you can manipulate all the metrics. You can manipulate DA. You can manipulate DR. You can manipulate CF, the number of RDs. Everything is possible. If you talk a bit with people, you'll realize that basically everything can be manipulated. It's not very complicated. It doesn't even require a lot of money. Honestly, there are Indians who do it super quickly and super efficiently. So I always tell myself that a metric on its own is inaccurate. If you look at it alone, it's off the mark. I realized that a pair of metrics, if you look at 2 metrics like TF and CF, for example, a classic duo from Majestic, there's a good chance that this pair works pretty well. Because in fact, maybe someone manipulated the TF, but maybe they didn't manage to manipulate the CF, and vice versa. So if you have a pair of metrics that are both a bit high, that's okay. When buying links, it's definitely a bit better already than just looking at TF alone. And actually, I realize afterwards, because I'm in the working world, I realize there are devs next to me. Sometimes they're terrible. And so I tell myself, maybe their dev team in my management, they're terrible. So potentially we're going to cross-check with other tools. And then I think, okay, if we manipulate one metric, okay, two metrics, why not? One tool, why not? Two tools. It seems complicated to me, all the tools at the same time. Actually, if everyone is being manipulated, it's probably that Google is being manipulated too. So at that point, I set up filters, kind of filtering systems. I want there to be at least 5DR, 5TF, 5CF, 5DR. I set up filters in every possible way. Everything is filtered. Then Babar comes along as well. I become really fascinated with Babar. I want to use their metric all the time and so on. So at that point, I was in a phase where I told myself, I'm only going to buy average things, but I'm sure I wouldn't let myself be manipulated. It was kind of the theory of averages. It was a time in my life as someone who buys links, and I was buying a lot based on average theories. A minimum amount of traffic, a minimum number of keywords, a minimum of everything. I had a kind of filter where I never told myself, yeah, but it doesn't have this metric. Then there's a phase that comes along and changes my life a bit as a link buyer, link maker, or link builder. It's the first time it hurts, as you might say. It's the first time you remember that one. We all do. If you've experienced it, I hope it never happened to you. It's that time when you log in, go to Google Search Console, and you see a little red warning sign. That time happened to me too. It happened to me in November 2020, I think, around then. I know it was in November, but I can't remember if it was 2020 or 2021. But there you go, November. And what happened? To tell you the story in short, update, Google, the PBN we were using to support our big sites, rankings, etc. I thought, okay, I'll try to make some changes because the sites that no longer have traffic that were ranking, maybe they're penalized, but we're not sure. So I'm going to make changes to the links so that the pyramid comes back to the T1, T2, T3 pyramid, returns to something coherent, etc. For a month, I changed links, anchors, text. I relinked, I unlinked, and so on. And a month later, we got penalized because I was just doing whatever. You're not supposed to change anchors all over the place like that. You're not supposed to change links, have T1S completely interlinked that go unlink, then relink, and so on. So in the end, I did things that were way too risky. It was super obvious. It was super easy to spot that it was an SEO messing things up behind the scenes. And so that first time was rough. It was the first time that hurt, not a pleasant first experience. But it's important in the life of someone who does link building because it teaches you to slow down a bit. Then I went through a whole phase. I changed markets. I changed sites. I started to, have bigger budgets. We grew. That's it. Kind of a team leader. And that's when I start to become aware. How do you create good links? That's the question I ask myself every day, every single day, every day. What is the best link? How can we get the best ROI from links? What is a good link? And actually, I buy a lot of them. At that time, I was buying a huge number of links. We're spending several thousand euros per month, every month for several months now. I'm in a phase where I'm buying. And actually, I'm doubting. I have a lot of doubts. I doubt everything. Because you doubt every single metric. You don't know which one is the right one. You doubt the topic. You doubt a lot of things because you see exceptions. I see exceptions every day. I see sites that rank without any links. I see sites that rank with only one type of link. I see sites that once ranked without links and have never built any since, yet they still rank, and so on. All the rules I knew that people tell me, that people say on Twitter, on the internet, on YouTube, and etc. I see exceptions every day, and honestly, it breaks my heart. It makes me realize that there are no rules, and in fact, I don't know anything. At this point, I'm not sure of anything. There's really nothing that's certain, even though I've already spent 150,000 euros on links. Basically, that's it. I've had my own experience, and there's only one thing I'm sure of. The only thing that's really certain is that we all need links to rank, that's for sure. That much we know for sure, but which is the best link? That we don't know. So we come up with theories about prices and so on. And I'm not the only one in this situation. The people I work with, my colleagues, my peers, they're all in the same situation. They all say, we have no idea. Earlier, I saw Edwin was connected in the chat. I talked about it with him in a YouTube video, and he told me the same thing. We just don't know. We don't know what makes a good link. It's impossible to know, and it's very complicated. It really hurts because we have to spend a lot of money. In this case, it wasn't my money, but now it is. Sometimes it's our own money, sometimes it's not. But we need to get the best possible ROI on that money. And not knowing and knowing that we might be wasting that money, that really hurts. I'm reaching a stage in my career where I'm starting to teach. This is the new phase of my career. I'm a team leader. I have 2 or 3 people on the team, so I'm starting to manage them. And now I spend more time explaining things to them, how to buy good links, how to check that the links they've bought are good links, and how to buy links myself. The thing is, to teach something, you have to master it. And in this case, buying links, as we've discussed, as I just told you, I'm not sure about anything. So teaching something you're not sure about is very complicated. But well, I do it anyway. I set rules. There's a quote by Pablo Picasso that I love, which is, learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. So I started by explaining the rules to my team for a month. I had them buy links only according to the rules. And then I would say to them, for example, this link here, why wouldn't you buy it? And they would answer, well, no, there's this rule that says so. And I say, but you know what? All the other signals, factors, and indicators tell us that this link is excellent, so we buy it anyway. So there you go. I taught them the rules and I taught them how to break the rules. I had a game that I loved for teaching, link building, buying links. It's a game I highly recommend if you ever have to teach someone about buying links. It's the Price is Right game. So quite simply, I would pick a link, I would send it to the whole team. I would tell them, you have 5 minutes to analyze. And then after 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you tell me how much you are willing to pay for this link. What's your max price for this link? And that allows you to define, explain, and get into people's heads to determine an ROI based on metrics and other factors. And to say to yourself, this is an overvalued link, this is an undervalued link, and so on. Generally, we do this with several links. I'd send them to analyze for max prices. Then I'd provide mine, letting them calibrate. And then we would say, well, here's the link. It's on such and such platform at such and such price. Do we buy it? Do we buy it or not? Considering the max and minimum prices we set for ourselves. Is it a good deal or not? It's a game I've used a lot and that I still use from time to time. I haven't trained anyone in a while, but whenever I do training on link building, it's my favorite game. So don't hesitate to play the net linking Price is Right. You'll see that it's always something quite interesting. And so we're going to talk about the rules. As I mentioned just before, I had set rules to explain to my team what my rules were. So I'm going to explain the rules to you a bit. Don't hesitate to take a look because these are a lot of rules that I still mostly agree with. You'll see that they're inconsistent, but as I said, we're not sure of anything. We don't really understand what's going on. So whether they're inconsistent or not, in any case, we play along. So I used to do several things. The first thing, my first theory, my first rule is to remind people that we're buying a commodity. We're buying page rank. We're buying, it's a unit of page rank. It's something that can be exchanged. It's not something where the page ranks are different. It's like when you buy Coke, whether you buy 50 centiliters of Coca-Cola or 2 liters of Coca-Cola, you're buying the same Coca-Cola in the bottle. So the goal is to buy this commodity, the page rank, this product, this entity, as cheaply as possible. The goal is to get the best quantity to price ratio. Just like when you buy a pack of Coke, you know that if you buy the 2-liter bottle, it's going to be cheaper per centiliter than if you buy the 50 centiliter bottle. So basically, the goal is to get page rank as cheaply as possible. That's my theory. That's my objective at that point. As I also told you, the goal is to reduce the risk of bad investments. One of my biggest fears is spending money and not getting any return. Honestly, that's simply a fear that a lot of people have. People are more afraid of that than of being penalized. They're really afraid of thinking, am I just throwing money away? Am I spending money for nothing? And that it makes you grit your teeth a bit because it's very difficult to get good information about the link. Given that, roughly speaking, the link, as I told you, even though I spent a lot of money on links, I still didn't have good information to share. So it was just theories, general rules that I was trying to come up with. I had a theory, which was that the quality of the content didn't influence the page rank you got from a spot. Quite simply, I'm on a site, whether I create good content or bad content, whether I write human, well-crafted content, like the guy really putting good work and everything, or if it's some crappy content thrown together quickly, basically a copy-paste of something else, as long as we're not dealing with duplicate content, etc., that's fine by me. It influences things, but not the quality of the link. So yeah, I was kind of in that mindset. We're sending out some pretty crappy content, but it's not a big deal. Like I said earlier, I think people are more afraid of wasting money for nothing than of getting penalized. Because those who get penalized, and we rarely talk about them, they're just there not doing anything. And that's it. It's settled. Personally, I have this theory that you can't get penalized for links except if you're dealing with a PBN. That's because I had a negative experience with a PBN, as you might know. That's actually part of the reason why at this point I no longer promote or want to push PBN strategies, because I find those strategies are just too complicated to maintain. In fact, there comes a point where you don't even know if it's positive or negative anymore. So there you go. I tell people, if you don't overdo it with anchor texts, if you don't use PBNs, you're not at risk. Theoretically, Penguin 4. Since 2016, it nullifies links, etc. They're not counted. It's not something that has a negative link. It's something that's just a concept that doesn't exist. It's the Americans who are toxic about this, but you shouldn't think about it. So there you go. I know all that stuff is in the back of my mind. I tell people there are no negative links. If you buy the cheapest links, either you get a good deal or nothing happens. Well, listen, that's why I like cheap links. You already knew it back then. And it's already when you look at the quality price ratio. Well, when you got caught, well, so here are the metrics I like. I like CF. I like CF because Remy Nastasio convinced me to like CF. Here you'll see it's not consistent. I love TTF even though I hate TF. It doesn't make much sense since both can be manipulated just as easily as each other. I like the number of RDs because, I don't know, my boss, Romain Mikula, told me that the number of RDs is important. I'm obsessed with the number of RDs. I don't really like the DR from HRF yet, but I tell myself that still it's kind of interesting. Traffic is fine, but for me, it's not something that's crucial at all. And you'll understand why in just a moment. I'll explain why. You'll also see at the end that this has changed. And finally, for me, language and topic are modulators. That is, if you're in the gambling industry, you buy a link on a site that talks about gambling in French. You're on French gambling sites. You get back 100% of what you were supposed to get. You buy a link. If it's a gambling site in English, you only get back 70%, but you still get something. If you buy a generalist link in French, it will also only be about 60%, for example. So basically, for me, it's not a bad thing to buy from another niche. It's just that it reduces part of the value we get back. And so the price needs to be adjusted accordingly so that it's at least 60, 70, 50, or 80% cheaper for it to be a good deal. Why do I like links without traffic? Like Brad Pitt in Moneyball, I think our job is to find hidden gems that are undervalued. That's how we get the best ROI, actually. And Brad Pitt in Moneyball, that's how he got the best ROI. He finds the guys who do weird stuff and says, okay, I'm recruiting all of them. So for us, our goal in link building is to do the same thing, grab all the slightly odd links that aren't expensive so we can buy them cheaply and get great performance for less. That was my theory. And why do I like links without traffic? Because they're overlooked. No one wants to buy a link without traffic because it could be penalized, etc. But for me, that's a site that hasn't really been given a chance. It hasn't had good content put on it and so on. If there's not a lot of content, it can't generate traffic. So that's the point. At one point, my strategy was to target spots, sites that were kind of like that. Cheap traffic, that's what I look at. There are only four articles in total, spread out over a year. Okay, we buy it because, in fact, the links tell me it's a good site. The content tells me it hasn't had its chance to get traffic and is therefore undervalued. So here we have a strong king here. That's just a theory. You saw my whole 2022 theory, basically, for buying links, which was the theory I had before everything changed, before everything got shaken up by new developments, before my new way of buying links came along. A little warm up with the Yandex leak, which happened in 2023. And then you think, damn, a leak from a search engine. All right, backlink, Wikipedia, they say that's the jackpot. Okay, interesting. It's not easy to get backlinks, Wikipedia, but anyway, thanks. They say you can't go above 50% optimized anchor text. They tell us that the frequency of backlinks is important, etc. They say a lot of things, but there are so many factors, it's complicated. If I had to remember just one factor from the leaky index, for me, it's the famous random factor. In the leaky index, you really notice that there's a factor that says this, it's random. That's just so that's a bit more complicated for you to understand the results so that SEOs get a bit messed up, so that the results vary a bit more than we think. They have a little random factor or they assign a small value, random as well, to determine whether you overperformed or you really outperformed. So we always used to say among colleagues that SEO was random. Now we had proof for real. The warm-up is over. I hope you're all warmed up. I hope you're more fired up than ever because we're getting to the crucial moment. This is the starting signal. This is the Google data leak. It happened in May 2024. That was 5 months ago. So we're still dealing with some pretty hot news, all things considered. It's the first time Google has really had a data leak, a leak of algorithms, a major leak. And I wanted to say a quick thank you. First, to the people who helped us spot this, who shared it, and who made it visible to everyone. I wanted to Irfan Azimi was the first person who spotted it, who saw it, and so on. So she saw it, she analyzed it, she said, okay, Google. She brought it to Rand Fishkin, who works at SparkToro and is a very good SEO specialist. He looks at it, gets his hands on it, and says, wow, this is something crazy. He said, we need to blow this up big time. So he goes to see Michael King, who works at iPool Ronk. All of them are English speakers. And he says to Michael King, okay, man, this is insane. Insane what we've found. There you go. He shows him the thing. Michael King tweets about it real quick. I've got something crazy. I'm working on it all weekend. I'll send it to you. So ready to make it happen. And there are two people, SEO. One of them is a guy named Dan, an Australian, who sends him a message and says, I think I know what you've got. I came across a Google leak a year ago. Basically, is it SACTech that you're about to reveal? Michael King tells him, yes, exactly. And so two people said, okay, well, don't do it, especially not. Michael King says, well, no, but man, this is information that's too important for the SEO world. We have to reveal it. And after all, we're two people, SEO. I mentioned him in the acknowledgements, but still, he's a guy who kept the information from the leak to himself for a year, all alone. On his end, which meant that when the articles came out, two people, he was able to say, wait, let me explain how this works, because he had a year's worth of analysis data, etc. But it also means he's kind of a jerk for keeping the info to himself. And he said later in a blog post that he was really bummed about losing that asset, that value, that thing he had that he was the only one to have, and which gave him a competitive advantage. It's understandable from a certain point of view, from a business perspective, but for the SEO world, I think it's a good thing that this leak came out. Namely, as you'll see in the following, there is a lot of data in this leak, a lot of functions, values, things like that, but there is no weighting. A lot is missing to know whether it's actually effective. So there will be times when I'll say, for example, spoiler alert, guest posts are boosted compared to link insertions, but we don't know by how much they're boosted. Are they boosted by 1%, 5%, 50%, 100%, 200%? We have no idea. So I'm going to tell you some things, some concepts, but as for telling you that you should apply this 100% without worry, that's not the case, because there are still weightings that we don't know about. So even if we have data and things that are apparent, we don't have the weighting. So the big question we're going to ask ourselves is, what's in this leak? What's in this leak? Basically, there's nothing in it that we haven't already hypothesized. As SEOs, we've always had lots of different hypotheses. All the hypotheses we've made, everything that's in the leak, are part of the hypotheses we've already made. There's nothing where we say to ourselves, it's completely crazy, something we never thought of. Everyone had already thought of everything. On the one hand, we rack our brains all day long. No wonder we make 10,000 hypotheses and 90% of them are wrong, while the truth is a few of them turned out to be true. The factor that I personally underestimated the most was UX, clearly. I really didn't believe in UX for SEO, and I was proven wrong. And now I see UX everywhere. So I don't know if it's a factor that's grown in importance, or if I was just blind to it, or maybe I was in a field where it didn't matter as much. Anyway, it's the factor I underestimated. We'll see later how important it really is or not, and we'll have a better understanding of the internal systems. Thanks to Sleek, there are internal systems that are more complex than you might think, or just as complex as you might expect, and we understand them a bit better. I'll show you quickly now. For example, a small internal system. There's Search Engine Island, which has made a lot of graphs for us. I use a lot of their data. By the way, for this presentation, I went through pages and pages and pages about the leak for the press. It's something I had already done back when the leak first came out, and I did it again for this occasion, because it's important to have good data to be proud of what we do. So here, indexing, typically, I'm not going to go on and on about it, but you can see that these are things that aren't simple. They have an indexing system. They have a SIG indexer system that distributes long-term data, authors, etc. And it spreads everything across 3 hard drives. Now, you might be wondering, what do you mean 3 hard drives? That's a crazy amount of data. Now we're getting into things that are really starting to get wild, in my opinion, regarding the leak. Google reveals in this leak that there are 3 indexes that are physically separated. When we say physically separated, it means there are 3 different devices to store and index the information. There are flash drives, so USB keys, to store everything that's super important and updated very frequently. So flash drives are the fastest system for access and modification. It's what allows, although it's very expensive, to have a whole portion of the data that's highly available and updated very regularly. We have SSDs that serve as secondary indexes, which are used to store all the articles that are consulted a bit less, updated a bit less, and crawled a bit less. As expected, finally, HDDs, hard drives where content is stored. They haven't changed much in 20 years. Here in the index, we're going to put it here because in any case, it probably won't change in the coming weeks or even years. It's really crawled. There are no visits. Frankly, the content doesn't really matter. 90% of the content, Google, well, it's the kind of thing where they have to put it somewhere because they've seen it anyway, so they index it. I don't know if you remember, but since 2020, we've had quite a few indexing problems. And the question of why we have these indexing problems, in my opinion, partly comes from, well, this concept of the three indexes. I think these are issues they didn't have before when they just had their own indexing system. There must have been two systems maybe, and they were kind of grinding away all of that in between. And little by little, since 2020, they've been forced to expand the indexing system. They've had to move content around, in my opinion, because they're realizing that the limits they've set aren't good for putting everything in one index or everything in the other. So they're forced to change their limits. They have to move things around in the index. That's why we see de-indexing, because there are pages that, in my opinion, don't make it from one index to the other. Or sometimes they go from the primary index, for example, the flash index, to maybe the SSD index, or even HDD, which is the worst. And potentially, in fact, Google can't manage to find everything that's in that index. It's just too much of a mess. So for me, all of this indexing, filters, 4 pages, I think of Julian Jimenez, who talked about it quite a bit, about filters, 4 pages back in the day. Because in my opinion, it was something that was connected. In fact, Google considered that the site was an average site. Overall, the site, let's put it in the SSD. It's an SSD site, so you get some indexing bugs. It's not great, and so on. And so that's what causes this effect. And I think that everything we've experienced with indexing and this concept of a triple index fit together really well, and very strongly so. Now, the big question we're going to ask ourselves is that there are 3 indexes. There's a golden index, the best of all, the flash. We want to get into that one. The goal is to flash some links. We're going to put links in the flash. The SSD, we want to avoid it. And the HDD, that's a cursed index. So how do we flash? How do we get links? Golden, to get into the golden index. I've prepared a little example of link insertion for you, because inserting a link can be a way to get into the primary index for sure. What's in the primary index? Actually, that's a big question we need to ask ourselves. There are pages that are updated very regularly, that are visited very regularly, that are crawled very regularly. So what does that mean? It means the pages that generate traffic, basically. So let's imagine, for example, that you go on Linka Vista, which has ranked pages. You're going to look for ranked pages. You apply a little filter. In this case, I use the keyword argent, money, and you can set a traffic filter. I set at least 150, well, 147 in this case, as the minimum number of visits to the URL. If you take this URL gets 170 visits at the URL level. It costs 20 euros. For 20 euros, you're not necessarily guaranteed to get an index link. You get a strong link. The link is in the primary index, that's for sure. And it won't move right away because it would have to drop significantly in ranking before it leaves those spots. So if you build links positioned on specific pages that generate a lot of traffic at the URL level, in that case, those pages are almost guaranteed to make it into the golden index, the primary index, the flash index. And for me, that's honestly, it's the best way to buy links. In France, it's starting to be valued a bit more, which is normal, but there are still some real gems when it comes to buying positioned links. You shouldn't buy links on your keyword, etc., because that's a bit too tricky. You need to buy links that are related and have traffic. And if you do that, I did it in the English-speaking market, for example. There are some crazy things you can do because English speakers aren't really aware of this, and you can do some really interesting things. The platforms aren't really well set up for this yet, but there's huge potential. It's something I did recently, and it worked well. Buying positioned links directly with traffic on the URL, this is something that's very powerful in my opinion because it guarantees primary indexation. And what else is in the primary index? In the primary index, as you know, there's Google News, because Google News gets indexed in 3 minutes. If it's indexed in 3 minutes, that means it's in the flash index. For sure, the entire site is in the flash index. It's on something that moves very fast. With Google News, it's certain we're in the primary index. How do you buy links from Google News? Well, on iReferer, they have a little checkbox for Google News. Just a reminder, the way iReferer filters Google News isn't great. So here's a little way to detect if a Gnews is a real Gnews, etc. There's the domain.com, you put the beginning of the URL and you add an asterisk. I'm not a Google News expert. If you ask Google News experts, they'll be able to tell you more precisely what the right method is. But I think this method works well. You go to the tab, News, you see your URL indexed here. If all of this is checked, it means you're on a real Gnews. And so that normally allows you to make sure this will get indexed super fast. It's certain that your site is in the flash index. So having flash index links, for me now, that's the best of the best. It's super important. And the flash index, for me, there are 2 methods. There are 2 methods in the way it start out. There's the site method. So with Gnews, we put the whole site in the flash index. Or there's the URL method. Sometimes you have entire sites that will be split between the flash index and the secondary index. Well, there you go. Pages of good quality that index well, that perform well, and pages that never get indexed, that struggle, etc. We can see it. Pages with poor quality content have a hard time getting indexed. They're not great. And so actually, in my opinion, those are pages that are in the secondary or even tertiary index. The goal is to have only pages that will be in the primary index. Either we achieve this thanks to the site being in the primary index, or we achieve it through an insertion on a page that is hosted in the primary index. As I mentioned a bit earlier, guest posts are boosted compared to link insertions. That's a data point we have as is. In Google's documentation, there's a place where it tells us that a new link is more powerful than an old link. I just told you to do the opposite, to go buy links that are already ranking, that generate traffic, etc. But Google tells us that a new link is better than an old link. All right, okay, thanks for the information. It doesn't really work in our favor, but that's how it is. It's a piece of information that's just dropped like that. Let's take advantage of it. I'm sharing it with you. Next, there's the question of the Holy Grail. What is the absolute best of the best of the best? It's a link that gets clicked. It's something that gets clicked, generally quite simply because we now know that Chrome is used to track data. It's something that everyone knew before, but we weren't 100% sure. We were 95% sure. Now we have all the data. The more visits there are, Chrome, we know it. Pop traffic made everything explode because we had the Chrome traffic criterion present in the leak. And now we also have everything related to nav boost in particular. So nav boost, I'm not going to get into a whole debate about nav boost today because my goal is to talk about links, specifically about net linking and offsite, but basically everything related to UX criteria, click criteria on pages, etc. Visiting several pages per visit, for example, spending a lot of time on the site and so on. These are criteria where we can see that there is actually quite a significant weight and that there's a whole important module dedicated to this. And so Nav Boost is a system that is used a lot internally because in reality, we navigate a lot within a site and a bit less, let's say, from one external site to another external site. In fact, we rarely click on backlinks. It's mostly internal links overall. However, Nav Boost is a system that works on all links, basically. So if you have a guest post that gets clicked, obviously the link has more value. Now, you might say to me, Leo, this still sounds like a bit of a vague theory. Still, there's Carl Roof who proved it with no follow links at Chiang Mai SEO in 2023. So I was at Chiang Mai SEO in 2023. There are a few people in the audience who were also at Chiang Mai SEO in 2023. And Kyle Roof, who is a very good English-speaking SEO specialist, he did a lot of tests with mass lorem ipsum content, and he had created links, no follow, and a no follow link that was clicked actually passed link juice, unlike other no follow links that weren't clicked. So the clicked no follow link always came out on top among a pool of 5 links. So a clicked no follow link does pass link juice. I think that a clicked do follow link passes even more. The advice I would give you is quite simple. Place your links at the top of the page. Put your links at the top of articles, in buttons, and in bold. Go for it. You can go all out. By the way, bold text is a factor that's mentioned in the leak. It's a factor that's important in the leak. It's a factor where it said that if a link is highlighted, it stands out more than the others. It's more visible and it carries more weight. So it means that a link in the footer, tiny, in PX8, doesn't necessarily bring much value. More link juice comes from a link that's at the top of the page on a bold button. Well, in that case, it brings more link juice. If it's clicked, it brings even more link juice. So that's kind of the holy grail. Try to make sure your links get clicked, but don't just put all your links in the introduction. Like all in bold buttons, because otherwise you'll get flagged for your net linking pattern. But if you avoid that and do it sparingly and intelligently, it will add value to your links. Normally, we're going to take a quick look at anchoring and spam, which was one of the fairly important points. Actually, you can really feel there's a big focus on anchoring and spam. They mentioned spam several times and so on. How do they handle spam in this leak, in this data, in the information that comes out? Basically, if you link too quickly, something happens. That is, the links are nullified. So as I already told you, there's very, very little chance of getting blacklisted or penalized for spam. There is a way to do it. I'll explain it to you at the end of this slide. But basically, if you link extremely quickly with the same anchor text, basically the links are nullified. There is a specific statistic, which is how many days it took to discover 80% of these anchor texts. So basically, if you get hit by a negative SEO attack, like in 2013, you'll receive anchor text links almost instantly. You'll get 500 of them from Fiverr sites. And when you look at it, you'll see that you received all 500 in the same day or within 2 days. So basically, if more than 80% of the anchor texts, if they were all received on the same day, it's over. It means it doesn't work. It means Google will nullify them. There's also the question of how many reliable sources you have compared to unreliable ones. There's really something with Google about this. Basically, you have to realize that you can't have only unreliable sources. If you only have unreliable sources, that's not the way to go. But if the reliable people say the same thing as the unreliable ones, then overall it's fine. It's okay. And the unreliable ones, the somewhat cheap sites, they'll be valued because there are reputable sites saying the same thing. So what does that mean? It means that a theory I had that you could just buy cheap stuff and that everything was equal, and that in the end, in 2022, I was thinking that we were buying a commodity. Well, actually, we're not really buying a commodity because there is still reliable and unreliable in Google. And unreliable doesn't mean it's worthless. It just means it exists, but we're not 100% sure about it. Whereas with reliable, we're more certain. So you need link profiles that are fairly diversified, with sites that are more reliable and sites that may be less reliable, to optimize the power you get from them. There's also a whole thing about the amount of content in relation to a link. So there you go, something we already knew. We stopped doing link farms a while ago. The French link selling, we know how to do it now. We've really optimized, we've really worked on our processes, so we're good there. So there's the question of the reference framework. So that was the thing we knew best. Basically, we're not going to write a blog post with 50 external links in it because we know that's over the top. On the other hand, we do tend now to create a site where we put an external link in each article. That's also something that's being monitored. Try to have, for each published article, several articles without any links, just to dilute the process a bit and to show that we're not a link farm, in the sense that we don't send out a link in every article. That's in the leak. Again, this isn't my opinion. I'm just telling you things I've read on the internet. Are the things we read on the internet reliable? You can never be too sure. So what ways are left to do negative SEO? SEO then? There's still one way to do negative SEO. It's actually pretty funny because it's a method I heard Paul Sanchez talk about back in 2018. So there you go. We're talking about a guy who was 7 years ahead of the game. He said the best way to do negative SEO is to create a lot of anchor text, optimize it slowly and in a controlled way on your competitor, and just act like you're a not so great SEO who pushes the anchors a bit too much. So right now, that's one of the only ways left to do negative SEO. SEO is about over anchoring, doing slow anchor text optimization on your competitor until their optimization rate gets too high and they don't even notice. Ideally, they don't notice it at all. Because if he's smart and the guy buys cheap links in bulk from Nkuma to dilute it, all of that allows things to, there you go, it breathes. The anchor text settle in, they gain their weight and so on. Potentially, a clever SEO can get attacked like that, but he can ride the wave, he can take advantage of it. If you see there's no SEO on the other side, that they're not very smart, you can over anchor and so on. And theoretically, you can go for it because at some point, he's going to get penalized. Anchor texts are the only thing that Google still penalizes because it gives too much control. It's too aggressive for Google. And I wanted to mention one last point. It's almost an open question. If anyone ever has the answer, that would be great. My big question right now is whether the transfer of PageRank happens before Mustang or after Mustang. And here, we're getting into some more technical concepts. But basically, Mustang is the whole scoring part. It's the system part, the basic algorithmic part. So basically, Google's core algorithm, its central algorithm is Mustang. And then it does things that slightly increase or decrease the factors and the weight of each site. So for a site to rank, it goes through Mustang. Basically, Mustang will tell you, okay, you're fifth. And then we'll check other things. We'll take a look. For example, are you fresh? Do you have freshness? Ah, yes, you're fresher than the others. You're more recent than the others. All right, boom. You get a little boost, a little plus. 10%. Do you have good click data on your pages? Yes, you have good click data on your pages. You've got an advantage, a boost that's with you. There you go, plus 10, plus 20%, etc. And so there are lots of things like that which get added in to determine the final scoring. And I don't know if, so basically the ranking system and the link juice transfer system, it happens. Maybe though, I don't think so, but theoretically it could happen close by. Mustang, so simply based on authority, simply based on the strength of the links you receive, it could be done within Mustang. Let's say with the semantic calculation where the title is not taken into account. By the way, you'll notice the title at the bottom right. It's a separate factor. It's not part of the page's semantics. It's not in Mustang's body. Thank you. It's a separate factor that comes in addition for keyword matching. So does this happen at the Mustang stage? At the moment when we have the calculation, the page's semantics are like this, the authority is like that, etc. We rank top 5 on this or that and so on. Is that where we define the link juice we're going to pass, the page rank we're going to pass? Or does all of that happen afterwards, after the calculation of homepage trust, document length, title, short, condensed, etc.? And basically, is there a boost if you have a good nav boost, so a good UX? Does good UX boost the page rank you receive? Honestly, as it stands, I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but I wanted to start my talk calmly with a question to which we'll probably never have the answer. If you have an opinion, feel free to share it with me directly, whether it's here on Twitter or even later during the Q&A session. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found my story interesting, from my first time up to now, where I've been studying how we became the best professionals. And I hope you all have a great day and enjoy the rest of the talks.
Hello, Leo. Happy to see you. Thank you very much for this talk. It was really great. I think people really liked it. There were quite a few reactions in the chat. If you're okay with it, let's start with the first question.
Go ahead, with pleasure.
All right. So Bison wasn't lying. He really did have a lot of questions. He's already asked 4. So the first one is RD the only metric that can't be manipulated? But then it's also the quality of the referring domains that matters.
Referring domains are super easy to manipulate. You do a redirect and the number skyrockets, your number of referring domains. If you look closely, you can spot boosted sites pretty quickly, referring domains, redirects, and you can even buy cheap links. If you buy links on Fiverr, really cheap and in bulk, you manipulate your referring domains. Then if he's thinking about DR from RFs, potentially the DR, it's a bit more complicated to manipulate than the others, I'd say. It's still pretty solid, but it's still fairly easy to manipulate. You search for manipulate DR, increase DR on Fiverr, and that's it. For $5, you get your boost.
Then he asked another question. Bison, he has quite a few, but what is a good price for a link in terms of price to metric ratio?
That's super complicated to do, and that's why in this case I didn't do it. But there are times when I do. I could have put it in the SERP in the slides, even just flashes of metrics, and say, okay, how much would you price this at? And it's really about doing a kind of price is right for the link. I didn't do it this time, but it's great. We could talk about it privately, honestly. It's not easy really to price this. There are a lot of factors to take into account. But yeah, you take a bit of traffic, a bit of TF, a bit of CF, a bit of everything, and you ask yourself, at what price am I willing? Actually, you ask yourself, at what price am I getting a good deal? That's how you see it. And when you know the price at which you're getting a good deal, buy at that price, because there are good deals out there, a lot of them.
So cool.
Okay, great. I'll take over with Bison's third question. In your opinion, what are the top rarest links?
The rarest links are the homepage link. The homepage link is the rarest. It's complicated to buy a good link. A homepage link, a well-positioned homepage link, not a homepage link stuck in the footer and zoomed out, not a homepage link in the sidebar, kind of sketchy, that moves to the footer when you're on mobile. A real solid homepage link, like a top of the homepage banner, for example. That's something that's really hard to get. A homepage link where you don't have a ton of people. I think that's the most complicated thing. Even though, honestly, I have quite a few friends who also tell me they're struggling to find links with 3 growing traffic sources. So basically sites where you can see they're really growing, that the site is healthy and so on. It's something that's apparently quite hard to find. And otherwise, what other kinds of links are hard to find? Well, there are already cheap links, really good links that are also inexpensive. It's not easy. I'm thinking of a site, for example. You'll laugh, but for me, it's one of the best links you can buy. I think the site is gayvoyageur.com. So it's a site about a guy who is gay and travels to lots of different countries to find out whether they're gay friendly or not. And the site, it gets tons of traffic and everything, but nobody goes on it because actually the fact that it's a gay themed site kind of puts people off, you know. And actually, when you look at the keywords, they're not sexual at all. So you know the site isn't about that side of things. On the gay side, it's just about whether, well, so there you go. Is it okay or not from an LGBT perspective to go to those countries? Crazy traffic, but the site is worth €5. Crazy metrics. Anyway, that's the kind of thing that's valuable in my opinion, and that people don't allow themselves to do because they don't really like taking risks, even though that's exactly the kind of thing you need to do. Okay.
A quick question from Frederick, who says, a noob question. Is a click with Chrome in incognito mode just as effective as a click on a link while logged in?
I think the more green flags you have, so if you're logged in, it's better, and even better if you're using the app. I think that's also fine because actually it contributes to the overall data. They benefit from it. They use it. I don't think it really, maybe you get 20% more value if you're logged in, But personally, if I were Google and had to calculate whether it's private mode or not, I would include it.
All right, I'll take the next questions. So what is a reliable source for Google?
It's super complicated to define, but there are reliable sources, original ones. That's kind of the best way we have to get close to it. And basically, it's the reliable sources that were defined right from the start through the Moz directory. I believe they're the ones who define TTF and the categorizations. So that's kind of the original way. And there are still things in the algorithm. Google even now refers to these sites, these so-called seed sites. So they're the first sites that are defined. What reliability meant was the trustworthy sites that were defined. There were about 1,500 or 2,000 of them. And in fact, they were basically page rank 10. And then we derived from that and said, okay, well, their links will be page rank 9. The links of those links will be page rank 8 and so on. So that was the foundation. It was the proximity you had in terms of net linking with one of the seed sites that defined your reliability. Now, it's all been mixed up again. It's been remixed and a lot of things have changed. But basically, that's what comes closest to reliability. I think I can really tell you that's it. The rest is just noise.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have quite a few questions. This is great. They're coming one after another. We still have a good 10 minutes, so we still have a bit of time. So Mohammed has a question. Does the class in the IP address also boost SEO? I've already run tests and I'm having trouble figuring it out. In any case, there is a difference. Can you confirm that for me?
Does the class in the IP address, the class, like classified, does that boost SEO? Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think that even from a subdomain perspective, it's a bit borderline. I think you're pushing it. I think Google, it can say that a subdomain is a different site. So I think if you're talking about Linky, about having that level of authority overflow, of authority propagation at the IP class level, I don't think it goes that far.
I really want to say thank you so much for all your help.
So I have a question from Guillaume who asks, for markets where links are very expensive, Sweden, for example, is it worth it to build your own PBN?
Yes, I did it a bit for Japan because it's a nightmare there. Just like in Sweden, Japan is tough. We're dealing with the same kind of problem. But is it really worth it to build your own PBN? Actually, the thing is, what will happen is you'll build your PBN, you'll snap up domains, Swedish domains or .coms where you'll put Swedish content. You'll rank just a little bit, so you'll have some domains that are kind of average and so on. If you even rank at all, because actually there's a good chance you won't rank and so on. Actually, yeah, I tell myself my job isn't to build Swedish PBNs. My job is to rank in Sweden, right? Thank you. If I have to build Swedish PBNs, it requires a lot of work. Often, even when it seems like a good idea, it ends up not being a good idea because you can't manage to do what you want to do with them. And yet, Swedish links are still being negotiated at 500 euros. That's probably because no one has managed to create good Swedish sites with traffic and sell links on them. Sometimes I tell myself, yeah, it didn't happen because there are Swedes who are gatekeeping and so they set the priorities, etc. But I think to myself at the same time, the Indians try so hard to sell links everywhere that if Swedish links could be done more cheaply, really, with less investment, less effort, etc., it would already be happening. But I'm conflicted. Maybe it's the only case where it would be okay to do PBN in places where links are very expensive. So Sweden, Norway, and then Japan, Korea, etc.
Okay, very clear.
A quick question from Abdul about negative SEO. He asks you, I receive a lot of spammy anchor text in negative SEO. SEO, what do you think about it? I haven't seen any effect on the rankings yet.
If he receives everything on the same day, it's okay, more or less. And if the anchors are spammy and they're really far off topic, if they're far from his niche, Google will filter them too. If the sites are low quality, Google will filter them. The only risky case is if someone buys them for him, sites that are pretty decent and that he builds himself, optical links that are on his keywords, and actually he does it too much. That's really a case where I've never seen one. If you have the determination to buy good links with good anchors for your competitor, because that's really giving away.
You're giving him little gifts.
That's it. It's over the top. But basically, that's the only case. And if you go too far and exceed the levels of acceptable optimization, then at that point, Google will hit you. But aside from that, there's still little chance. No one does that. You really have to be determined to do it.
You have to be sure it's going to work.
If it doesn't work, you've just boosted your competitor. Because sometimes in terms of optimization levels, you can go really high in certain fields on certain topics. And Google is tolerant. And then if the guy de-optimizes, so I don't recommend doing negative SEO. especially negative tactics like that. There might still be some things you can do with duplicate content systems and so on, but honestly, it's tough.
Basically, it doesn't really work anymore. It's
super complicated to pull off.
all right. Thank you.
So, Key School is asking us, do the leaks provide a new perspective on the net linking strategy for a brand new domain name, i.e., a new powerful link versus an old backlink by definition?
For me, what has changed regarding new domain names is the proportion of links I put on the homepage. There's a factor I haven't mentioned, but basically it says that a link to the homepage benefits the entire site. And so there's this whole thing about that. So basically, I try to create more links to the homepage. Before, I used to think that the homepage was just a page like any other on the site. And that page rank circulated within the site through links in a natural way. Now, what I do is I tell myself that the homepage deserves links because it will benefit the entire site overall. So there you go. Afterwards, I think there's still a theory where you can, it's a bit convoluted again, but hey, that's what we're here for too. It's about rehomepagizing your site. And basically, if you put all your links and you do, so a lot of links, all your internal page rank points to a single page that isn't your homepage, I think you can define a new homepage for your site. And Google will get the impression that this page, Google will theorize that this page is your homepage, that it's by far the most powerful page, and so on. But these are rather dubious theories. I advise you not to do that. Don't do that. Do simple things that work. But theoretically, I think it could work.
Okay, very clear. Thank you.
A question from Yuko about anchors. Do you have a breakdown for optimized, semi-optimized, and non-optimized anchors?
That already depends on your topic. Roughly speaking, if you're asking yourself this question, it's because you're working on a topic that could be interesting. If you're working on a really hot topic, let's say you can go up to 10%. Actually, now I do a lot of semi-optimized anchors. I find that semi-optimized is better, and then I really push on the semi-optimized, but maybe now I do 40%, 50% semi-optimized. I almost only use semi-optimized anchors, and then maybe one or two links that are fully optimized. After that, I try to dilute the rest with non-optimized anchors. But I wouldn't recommend doing what I do. I do it because my clients are hungry for results and because I have a go-getter mentality. But if you're doing things safely, I think you should avoid doing that too much.
So good. Thank you.
So we still have quite a few questions. Let's take Arno's question. Do you think that a former Genius domain, which is no longer in Genius, still retains interesting properties for indexing?
I don't know. I have no idea, but it's worth testing. We'll have to see. I think that as soon as you're in the publisher business, publisher center, it's easier for you to get indexed. There's still an aspect where you might already be meeting a certain criterion with that. But if you were a former Genius and you're no longer Genius, if you're telling me you're no longer Genius, it means you no longer have the benefits of being Genius. So if you no longer have the benefits of being Genius, you might not have the indexing advantage anymore either. So I don't think it opens up. I hear someone in the chat saying that it works. There's someone who's handling Genius.
Next, I had a quick question. So we didn't ask you this one. I found it again. Do links from X work? And what do you think about them, roughly speaking, links from X?
Are we talking about what kind of X Twitter?
Especially given the type of conference and all that, I admit it can be confusing when you say from Twitter.
The Twitter link, I think it depends on what you do with it. If it's clicked, actually, it brings power because it provides a kind of overall benefit. Honestly, I don't know. For me, it's fine. Everything brings power as long as it's clicked. If it's not clicked, it doesn't bring any juice. Except if it's not clicked but Genius, not clicked but it has traffic, not clicked but it's a real guest post, there's page rank, etc. Then on social networks or all those things in general, if it's clicked, it'll bring a little something. I'm not saying it's authority from the game, but it gives a little boost.
Okay, that's great.
So let's go. We'll take 2 or 3 more questions. Damien's question, is massive link removal riskier in a negative way versus exact match anchors over the long term, as you mentioned?
Yeah, it is actually really quite funny because the whole theory from Paul Sanchez back in 2018 was you create a lot of over-optimized links pointing to your competitor in a loop. And if you see that after a while it doesn't work, you remove all the links you've made. And so it gave you this thing where you over optimize, you try your luck with over optimization. And if the over optimization doesn't work, you can cut everything off at once. And potentially Google might say it's not normal to lose all those links. And I also think there's really something where you cut everything, you interlink everything, and you use weird anchors, etc. You're doing what I did with my PBN. It could get someone penalized because if Google sees haphazard patterns on the LinkedIn model, it signals and SEO is manipulating things.
Okay.
Awesome. I had a quick question from Midui. Is it worth buying positioned links? That's a good question.
Personally, I think that positioned links, that is, it depends, positioned links with traffic or without traffic. For positioned links without traffic, what I used to do historically was only buy links that were in the top 50 generally. Because actually, if you are in the top 50, it means that Google has still everything above the top 50 fluctuates like crazy. It moves in all directions. Everything below the top 50 is still pretty dense for the keywords I work with. Potentially for your keywords, it might be the top 30 or top 20. And actually, it's about targeting sites that don't move around too much, because a site that doesn't move around much means that Google has stopped testing it. It stops making it fluctuate. It placed it here. It likes it. And so potentially it's in the flash index, in the good index, the golden index. Actually, the goal of buying positioned links is really to get into this golden index. Buying a link in the top 70 that then drops out of the top 100 shows it wasn't indexed properly. Google was just testing and filling its results randomly. But actually, the best is a positioned link with traffic. A link positioned on your keywords is always interesting in the top 20, etc. It's powerful, it works well, but I find it a bit more risky because you never really know what's the limit, primary index, secondary index for your clients.
Okay, great. We've covered all the questions. What time is it? It's 59. The timing is pretty good. We have Joni and Clement who have just arrived for their conference as well. So we're perfect. Thank you very much, Leo. Thank you so much for sharing, for your time. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to be with you today. And listen, I'm leaving you in good hands with Joni. Thank you. Thanks.
A lot. See you soon. Hi. Hi, Leo. Ciao.